Okay, lower hand.
All right, so should we start? We'll wait for, I think people start pouring in. I'll do the introductions while we wait for others to come in. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sidhi Dhir. I'm the Executive Director of TiE Singapore. And welcome today to our business series called Mastering the Talent Agenda, People Make or Break Business Success. Our speaker for the session is Leanne Poon. Originally from Canada, Leanne has lived in Hong Kong, Belgium, Japan, and has been living in Singapore for the past 5 years. After starting her career in banking, she pivoted into the world of HR. She's currently the Chief of Staff in the APAC GBOP staffing team in Google. Beyond her core role, Leanne coaches startup founders and SME leaders based in UK, Spain, Africa, Japan, and Southeast Asia in the areas of leadership, culture, and people strategy. She also regularly mentors university students and industry professionals on career planning and development. Outside of HR, Leanne is very passionate about space and education and is involved with a number of projects, including a space education outreach program and some education-based NGOs in Cambodia. Before I hand it over to Leanne, a few hygiene rules. This time we are trying the concept of meeting and not a webinar because we intend to make this session very interactive. Feel free to open your videos to, so that the speaker can see you while she's having a conversation with you after the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to write it in the chat mode or raise your hands and we'll, request you to speak your question or ask your question to Leanne later on after her presentation gets over. This business series is under the Emerge program, which we are conducting in collaboration with YBI with support of google.org to help the SMEs and startups who are struggling due to the COVID pandemic. With that, Leanne, over to you.
Thank you, Sidhi. Hello, everyone. I think it's a pretty intimate crowd. So as Sidhi mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself, I think, if you're able to. I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Okay, hope you guys can all see my screen. So yes, today we're going to talk about Google strategy, people strategy. I will have a huge disclaimer though. Of course, this works for Google. It may not be, it definitely is not for all organizations, but hopefully this will give you some ideas into how you can apply some of these or similar tactics in your organizations. So because it is a smaller crowd as well, if you want to ask questions in between the presentation, that's totally okay. Otherwise, at the end, there will also be Q&A. Okay. So first off, 65%. What does that mean? So Harvard Business School did a survey a while back with some venture capitalists to see what is the #1 issue that people face in a startup. So I know some of you might be from SMEs, some of you are from startups. There are similarities. I understand there's also differences, but the #1 reason that people talk about in terms of like challenges that they face, 65% of them say it is people issues. Okay, so it's not product or go-to-market strategy or fundraising per se. The #1 issue is people. So I hope that's maybe also why you guys are in this session today, to learn more about how you can maybe hire people, attract talent, attract better talent, retain them, and how to build a culture that suits your company. Okay. So with SMEs, so that was for startups, right? With SMEs, I managed to pull some of these from online resources as well. So within APAC and Singapore specifically, I think people is also a very big challenge that SMEs face. Definitely with limited resources, limited financial resources. How do you attract talent, and also how do you get your brand out there, right? So hopefully again, today's session will help with some of that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the culture and life at Google. But first of all, just some trivia and background history, right? So as you may all know, Google started in 1998 by these two gentlemen, Larry and Sergey. So you can see it was a startup to begin with. Now we are much larger, obviously. 23 years later, we are in 60 countries around the world, 170 cities, and in APAC alone, we have 30 offices. So fun fact, the first international office for us opened in 2011, and that is actually in APAC. It was our Tokyo, Japan office. So as you can see, there's a lot of potential even from the beginning in APAC. And as Sidhi mentioned, I'm from Canada, but I've been in APAC for over 10 years. I think I want to stay here because I see a lot of potential here. And Google sees that as well. There's a lot of investment pouring into APAC these days. So it's very exciting right now. Okay. Oh, is there a chat message? Bear with me for a sec because I see a poll coming up.
There's a chat message, but we'll take care of that, not to worry.
Okay, all right. Then please just shout. I'm not able to see the chat, so just shout if I need to stop or pause or at all. Okay, thank you. So yes, Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So this has not changed. Our mission has not changed in 23 years, but how we do this, how we go towards this goal has evolved. So we have three guiding principles. We call them the three respects: respect the user, the opportunity, and each other. So obviously with the user, that's anybody who uses our products and services, and we want to make sure that we are benefiting them. And we believe that if we are improving their lives with our products and services, then all else will follow. So that is our number one guiding principle. Respecting the opportunity. At Google, we have tremendous responsibility. A lot of the things that we do touch on billions of people's lives. So again, we want to we understand that the gravity of that, and we want to respect that. We can solve for a lot of people at the same time, and we want to make that meaningful. And the third respect is respecting each other, obviously respecting our coworkers, making sure we are creating a very inclusive environment for all of us to be working in, helping ourselves to show up at work as our whole selves. So I'll talk more about that as well shortly. So I do want this to be a little bit interactive. So what do you think is a Googler's single best perk? A Googler is an employee of Google. We call ourselves Googlers. So are you able to type in the chat? And I'll try to. Yes, I can see the chat. Don't be shy. Any guesses on what is our biggest perk? Sometimes when I ask this question, people would say our food or our gym or masseuse. But obviously with COVID, all of us are working from home. We don't really get that. Casual dress culture. Anybody else? Ideas, diversity, yeah. Mind share, easy life. Easy life, I guess that's subjective. Flexible timings. Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing. So I would say actually, so it's not just me, we did a survey on this. A Googler's best perk is people, the people we work with. And I guess similar to somebody put ideas, the ideas that the people generate. So we are talking about people today. So without further ado, how do we hire people? I won't go through this in a lot of detail because this information is online as well. But I guess similar to a lot of companies, we have an application process, obviously, then a phone interview, a phone screen. And after the phone screen, then a person goes into on-site interviews. With COVID, again, we're doing all of these not on-site now, not in person, but over video conference. So after 4 interviews, talking to somebody face-to-face over video, if the person is successful and we want to go forward with this person, then we would send them to what we call a hiring committee for review. The hiring committee is a committee of people who is at arm's length to this person. So usually they're sitting in a different country or a different region altogether. What they're evaluating this person for is really if they're a candidate who is good for Google as a whole, not just for that role that he or she is applying to. Because we want to make sure that people are fungible. We want to make sure that people are going to have a career at Google that they can feel like they can do anything that they want. They can grow and develop in different directions, different areas, not just being stuck in that one role, right? So after hiring committee review, if all goes well, then there's an offer. So from a phone interview to an offer usually takes about 8 to 10 weeks. It's relatively long. I would say there are pros and cons for this. Like my recruiting team, I think we try to streamline it, but at the same time, we don't want to compromise on the process by speeding through a process and not really giving each candidate a fair chance. So on average, it's been about 8 to 10 weeks, but give or take, depending on the organization, depending on the department. Okay. Any questions so far? Feel free to jump in. All right, move forward for now then. So what do we actually look for when we hire a candidate? There are 4 attributes specifically we look for. Again, this is online. This is not a secret. It is open to public. There are 4 attributes, but I would say they're not equally weighted. Okay, I'll go through all of them first, and I'll explain why I say they're not equally weighted. So the first one, they're not in any order either, but the first one, general cognitive ability. This is basically problem-solving skills. So many years ago, you might have heard about this. We used to have interview questions that are like brain teasers, like how many golf balls do you think fit into an airplane? Things like that. So we don't ask those questions anymore, but what we do ask are more practical, more realistic questions to still understand how a person problem solves, what their thought process is like, how they arrive at a solution, what their assumptions are, things like that. So we do test for this, but in more practical ways. The second point here, role-related knowledge. So this is just basically like, are you able to do the job that you're applying for? I would say out of these 4, role-related knowledge is probably the least important in a way, depending on the role, of course, right? If you're applying for a legal position, then obviously we want you to be an expert in legal things. But a lot of times, if the role permits, we do try to hire people who come from different backgrounds, who may come from a different expertise area. We want them to be able to bring in different ideas and come with it at a different lens, right? Obviously, we want to make sure that this person is also able to ramp up very quickly and learn a new area. So again, I would say role-related knowledge, probably if you are very good at the other 3, and if the particular role does not require you to have prior knowledge, then the role-related knowledge is less important. Leadership skills, this is probably pretty self-explanatory. You don't need to be a people manager to be a leader. How are you able to inspire followership? How are you able to influence people without authority, right? That is true leadership. And so we do test for that as well. And last but not least, Googliness. That's a word that we created. I don't know if it's in an actual dictionary, but this is what a lot of people would say culture fit. But in Google, we call it culture add, because we don't want people to fit into the Google culture. We want people to add to it. And this encompasses all the soft skills, obviously, like, are you able to work well with a team in a team environment? Can you thrive in ambiguous situations? What do you do if something changes and there's a lot of uncertainty? I guess that's ambiguity as well. So how do you react? How do you behave in those kind of situations? Okay, so again, these are the attributes that we look for at Google. Whatever you look for is fine, but define that, make sure your whole company knows about it, because every individual, every employee in your company is an ambassador to help you hire as well. It's not just your HR person, it's every single person. Whoever they meet when they talk about your company, they're representing your company. So what are the things that you want them to demonstrate and to look for when they're out talking to other people? So again, whatever attributes you define, that will be your brand, employment brand. Keep that top of mind for everybody in your company. Okay, they don't have to be these 4, but you have to define them. Okay. So since we're in APAC, since we're in Singapore, we'll talk specifically about what APAC is like. We do have incredible diversity in Singapore alone. For those of you who are in Singapore, you know, like just in the community of Singapore, not just at Google, we have a lot of diversity. So we want to represent the market in Google as well. But how do we actually include everyone? This slide just shows like a board game for those of you who don't know. It's a board game called Settlers of Catan. Before COVID happened, in a lot of our offices, we have these things called culture clubs. And before COVID happened, they had a lot of initiatives to help bring the community, to bring the office together. They have board game nights, or they might have different culture events, or maybe our gym trainers might have gym challenges or competitions to bring people together, whatever the interest might be for somebody. So obviously with COVID happening, with lockdowns, most of us working from home, that's been a challenge, but they've still been very active and proactive in creating these events virtually. So I know we still have virtual game nights, virtual culture events to keep people engaged and feeling connected to Google and to our office, even though we may not be seeing each other face to face all the time. I do want to talk specifically about 3 different areas: learning, sharing, and caring. In terms of learning, we want to keep our Googlers always learning and curious. Actually, keeping Googlers curious, I think that's not difficult, because almost everybody I know at Google, they are already naturally very curious. But how do we channel that curiosity into something that can help them develop as well? So there are a lot of things here. I won't go through all of them, but the first one, for example, 20% projects. Maybe some of you have heard about this, but this is basically a person having a 20% time that they can allocate to a passion project. So that just means 1 day out of 5, 1 day out of the week, out of the 5 days of the week, they can do something else that's not part of their core job. This has started for, I don't know when it exactly started, but at least in the beginning days of Google, this has been around. And it started with the engineering team first. So the engineers were able to identify different problems aside from their day job and focus on that about 1 day a week. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly 20%. It can be 5%. It can be more than 20%, whatever makes sense. And fun fact again, in case you didn't know, Gmail, Google email, actually came about as a 20% project. So there are a lot of these things that help our Googlers keep thriving, keep learning. There are School for Leaders, online courses as well that we have in place to help a Googler learn in a different environment. Environment not being a physical environment, right, but just a different situation. And then sharing that, whether it is knowledge that you've learned on the job or knowledge that you've had already. We have a very strong community of what we call G to Gers, Googlers to Googlers. Basically, any Googler can sign up or can create a class to teach other people something, whether it is yoga or cooking or coding. I've taught a crochet course here. So we encourage people to share their passion, their knowledge with one another. And this actually has proven really critical, at least personally, I believe it has been critical in keeping the community together during work from home during COVID. Because a lot of the G2G courses had to obviously move online, they become virtual. But even virtually, some of these courses make sense, they can still happen. And it creates that sense that we haven't really become so distanced. Physically, yes, we are, but we are still a community learning together. So sharing. And lastly, I wanted to talk about caring about the community. These are all pictures, I believe, from Singapore. We do have a philanthropic arm of Google called google.org. So this is part of the google.org partnership with TiE Singapore. We do donate money, obviously, and also donate our time. We do a lot of volunteering work through google.org initiatives. Globally, we do a lot of massive projects, but locally, we focus a lot on homegrown, bottoms-up, grassroots initiatives. So we help out with local soup kitchens, we help out with community cleanup. We have a lot of events where we educate and nurture the next generation, the younger folks, to get them thinking about their career or maybe just being excited and inspired of a certain career path. We do focus a lot on the underprivileged communities. I think before COVID, not recently, but I've done a lot of work with kids with parents who are in prison. So having an adult figure to inspire them, I think is very important. So we did a lot of work with that group as well. So I've talked a lot. I think that's the last slide. Yes, so thank you very much. I'm open for questions. There is a link there as well called rework.withgoogle.com. A lot of people-related things, resources are on there. So I would highly encourage you to take a look, whether it's like how do you set a team culture, how do you set OKRs, those are all on this site. So a lot of our research at Google actually is now public on that site.
Awesome, Leanne. That was quick and very crisp. Can I request you to close your screen or slide presentation so that we could start the questions and have a conversation. Everyone would request you to, if you're comfortable, to switch on your videos, and so we all could have a conversation with Leanne and take this discussion to the next level. Brilliant. Hey Manish, I see Manish joining in. Joanne's come in as well. Hey Joanne. Leanne, I would start with one question. So I have a couple of them, and folks, please either put in your questions in the chat mode, or you could just raise your hands and we could ask you to ask Leanne directly. Leanne, I had one question. You talked about culture and people coming from various diverse backgrounds and who could probably contribute to the whole Google culture. How important is university ranking there?
So it used to be quite important, but in recent years, we've deliberately moved away from it. We have actually hired a lot of people without university education or without like the traditional career path as well. And they've proven to be very successful. And you might know we have like Google certificates that you can do online as well. So especially for people maybe without the traditional route of education, or maybe somebody who is already a career professional looking to change jobs. So having those certificates show us what actual skills you have that speak volumes over what education you have, like which university you went to. So I would say it's not very important. It's not important at all.
Got it. And Leanne, with the whole work from home culture, do you think that has affected the way Googlers work, or it didn't make a difference at all? What is your take on that?
Absolutely. I think it's affected everybody around the world, not just at Google, right? Good or bad, it's affected people differently, I would say. But personally, I feel like I'm quite fortunate because 5 years ago I was working in Japan. I was living in a very tiny apartment. In Singapore now, I am lucky. I have a roommate and she has a cat. So I feel like if I were doing this work from home thing in Japan, I would have felt very lonely in a very tiny apartment by myself. But now I had company. And also, I think it affects people differently, right? Like I have colleagues who have kids at home, who have other family members they have to take care of. So it's not ideal. But for those of us like me who are fortunate enough to still have like a proper well-being, like a proper space for working right now here, I think it still has an impact because I'm not able to connect with my colleagues in a face-to-face situation. Just the other day, I went to the office because our office is now open in Singapore. We can choose to go in. We don't have to, but we're allowed to go in. Just going into the office, I bump into a lot of people that I know that I haven't seen in over a year. They're not in my team, but I know them, right? But if I didn't bump into them, I wouldn't have had a reason to just like schedule a meeting with them or something, right? So I think being in the office, being in a physical place where you can serendipitously just bump into people, that's a huge perk as well for me. So working from home is different. It's something you have to get used to. There are pros and cons.
And how do you ensure that they work from home? I mean, I know every company might be struggling with that, but then again, there are milestones, but then just wanted to understand a Google perspective on that.
Yeah, so I think even before COVID, some people, we have very flexible working environments. Even before COVID, we were able to work from home if we wanted to, not full time, but maybe once a week or something. Depending on your work again, I think there are some people that need to be in the office for certain reasons. So I think we have a very flexible culture and very trusting culture where we believe that people are delivering. We don't need people to work the traditional hours of like 8 hours a day, as long as they deliver, right? That's the critical point, is whether they're able to do what they're supposed to do. But obviously as well with COVID, a lot of things have been impacted, even if they're not able to deliver, and there's reason for that, maybe again, because of the home environment not conducive to working, whatever the context is, we take that into consideration. But we trust people. I think there's a lot of trust in the company.
I totally agree with that, Leanne. And this would be my last question. I would really request everyone attending to please raise your hands or type in your questions to Leanne. Leanne, like you said, that there is a trust thing, and after the work from home culture, probably after the COVID, the whole pandemic eases out, and people are allowed to go back to office, and then it's back to normal, or the new normal. Would you think that the kind of importance it was laid on a 9 to 5 job, would it still be the same, or would it shift or bend towards a milestone based work where you could, if you commit on doing a certain task in a particular time period and you finish it, you're good to go. And you don't need to clock in those many hours. Do you think that change would happen?
I can't speak for the whole world, but I do see a lot of companies already changing like that. Google, we are looking at that as well. So I think COVID was not great for any reason, but I think if there is a silver lining is that it has proven that remote working could work. Again, maybe not for all companies, but in most organizations, I think it's fine because we have the technology these days to meet people even from across the world. Why can't we do that for people in the same location, right? Again, like I still want the option personally to be able to go to the office and just randomly meet up with people. But I do see it shifting, that we don't have to always be on during the core work hours. I say that, but again, like even before COVID, Google has been operating like that, but I do see more of a shift in terms of other companies also doing the same thing. There are a lot of companies now already saying like they're going to be 100% remote work after COVID, even after COVID lockdowns are lifted. So that's promising. I think that's very extreme, but I don't know. I see a lot of positive change in the right direction.
Well, that's really refreshing and good to hear, Leanne. Joanne Tace has a question for you. What is the attrition rate like at Google?
I actually don't know, to be honest, but it is, I don't know the exact number, but I know that it is lower than industry. I heard about that recently, but it will differ from location to location. And I think we are able to keep it at a relatively low rate because of what I talked about earlier, like how do you create that inclusive, engaging culture for people to feel like they want to be part of this community. And then the people who leave us, actually, we do hire a lot of people back who leave us. So when we hire people back, we want that different perspective that they bring as well, from having been at Google, left, and come back. I think another reason we're able to keep the attrition rate low is because we hire people who are hopefully going to be fungible, to be able to transfer from role to role. If somebody doesn't work out in a certain role, we tend to believe that it's because they're mismatched for that role. Maybe they've outgrown the role. So we always try to fit people in a different place if possible, before the topic of leaving Google completely comes up.
Got it. Any other questions from anyone in the audience?
So okay. So there's a question, Custom. I don't know how to say your name, sorry. Oh, that's a direct message, sorry. Okay, I'll reply to you later on if it's a direct message privately. So HB, if you have vacancy for 2 positions that you have the applicants who all qualify and are good fits, what do you do with the reject? Thank you, HB. So again, wherever possible, if they're good candidates, even if they didn't work out for one specific role, like role A, we would try to find other places for them. There's a stat, I don't remember exactly now, but a lot of the people we end up hiring into Google, actually, it may not be their first try to apply to Google. Sometimes we may just not have a role for somebody, but we really think this person would be great for Google, but we don't have anything right now. But we keep in touch, and maybe a year later, 2 years later, we re-engage with them and we hire them. So we don't like to call them rejects either, because again, like they may have been rejected for this particular role right this moment, but there might be other more suitable roles for them in the future. Does that answer your question?
Leanne, I have a question here.
Sure.
You're in the people industry, and Google's main asset are people. according to you and in your experience, what is one core qualification or characteristic which you think is essential for anyone to be a good team player or lead a team, or basically, one great attribute that a person should have moving forward, irrespective of the role?
There are so many. To narrow it down to just one.
Oh, you could say more.
Then I will say two, just because like it is hard to say just one. But the first, probably the most important, I would say, is part of that googliness one. It is like how you show up as a person to the rest of the people that you're working with. Are you able to embrace diversity and then be inclusive? Because I think only then can you really get the best from everybody to really maximize the potential from the people you work with. The second one, though, I do think the general cognitive ability is also very important. Because even if you're able to work very well with people, you bring out the best in others. But if, let's say, like there's a problem, you're not able to solve it, that's not helpful. So I think if you're able to do both very well, then that would be the magic solution, magic scenario.
Awesome. Folks, anyone else with any questions for Leanne today?
Manesh, how does Google work with self-employed or contractors? What sort of expectations do you lay down? Are you talking about like hiring people who have been self-employed or who have been contractors? Or are you talking about us engaging with them as a freelancer?
Sorry, just it's an open question basically. Look, I've got my own setup, and I've got certain expertise in, let's say, finance and accounting. And if I want to provide services, now, how does it work from Google perspective? Just wanted to get an idea. Of course, you all have more than 130,000 people, so probably every area you all do have somebody or the other who knows the thing. But I'm sure you all tapping into a lot of contractors and self-employed also.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Manesh, for your question. I don't know specifically because my team doesn't handle this, but I do know that we do engage with like self-employed freelancers. Yes, we have a lot of people. We can do a lot of things in-house, but sometimes there's just scale and efficiency in outsourcing these to freelancers, contractors, self-employed ones. So it depends which area it is that you're talking about. I know for one, like designers, maybe, like we do have designers in-house at Google, but sometimes we do also want to engage with external designers. So there are use cases for that, but I wouldn't say that it's very, very common.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. The last question is, Leanne, do you work with startups? The answer, of course, we all know is yes, but then
okay.
You work with startups.
Yeah, again, I think very similar answer to the one just now about working with like a person who is self-employed. It depends what that startup is. I don't see it a lot, like Google working with a startup, but there can be a reason to outsource. So it just depends on what your value proposition is. Well,
the chances are that you may be bought out from Google, by Google, so that's always an advantage of promoting yourself.
Yeah.
Always an advantage. With that, again, I would like to thank you for today's session. This was really useful and crisp. For everyone who could join us today, we would be sharing the YouTube link with all our registrants, and it would be there for a year on our YouTube channel, and we'll share that with everyone. Thank you so much. Join us next week on the 1st of April for our Go Digital series called Digital Transformation with Google by Yolanda Yin. She's a Senior Program Manager, Sales Enablement and Activation at Google Cloud. So see you next week for that, and next week for that. And before you leave, would request you to please fill up this very quick poll that we'll be launching so that you could help us make our program better. With that, Leanne, thank you so much for your, spending your time with us. And thank you all the attendees who could come in. Thank you so much, Manish, and everybody else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck and take care, everyone. Bye. Bye.
folks, sorry, unable to launch the poll. I'll share it post the session as a form. It would be great if you could just reply and share it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.